Face to face, hand to hand, film to film.
Welcome to the Film to Film podcast. My name is James Shergan, and I am joined here by my good friend Iñaki. How are you doing, Iñaki?
Doing pretty well. How about you?
Not bad. So today is kind of a landmark episode for us, mainly thanks to me. We have talked about a lot of Giallos throughout the course of this podcast, and I think this is going to be the last one, at least for some time. And we've kind of worked our way through from the very beginning, the Mario Bava ones, all the way through the late Gialli, which have tended to trend Argento. Argento is one of the few filmmakers with the cachet to continue making films as he got older into kind of the period where Giallo was less popular and the Italian industry had really tanked. And so we'll be talking about Sleepless from 2001. I will mercifully not bring on his later Gialli, which are, in my opinion, a little bit worse, but he does have another Giallo that is coming out to Shudder, his first film in over a decade, later, I think in about a month, so Dark Glasses, a film that I'm looking forward to seeing, but yeah, that would be a very, very late Gialli. This one, as it is, no one is making Giallo at this time in 2001. But before we do that, I wanted to do something a little bit different and a little bit special. So we'll see how this works, and we're going to do a Giallo draft, where we are going to be collaboratively working together in order to draft the best 7 Gialli, quote unquote, because this is a very casual exercise too. So we have seen 20-something Giallos, but we will be just kind of from that list bringing on 7, and whatever that means as far as like creating the top 7 list goes. So something not to be taken too seriously, but also something kind of for fun. So Iñaki, how are you feeling about the draft?
Yeah, I'm ready.
You definitely sound very ready to go. So, I mean, this is the first time. It's inspired by a podcast called Screen Drafts. The Big Picture also does drafts, but I am following the format of Screen Drafts. Basically, how it works is one of us will have the 2, 4, 6, 7 pick, and we're going to start from the very bottom of that list. So that person will pick number 7, and then number 6, and then the other person will pick number 5, and then 4, and then all the way down to 1. And you can also we both have 1 veto each, which basically means that if I don't like what you picked there, either because I think you have it ranked too high or too low, I can veto it, and then it goes back to the drawing board, and either of us can draft it later on in the draft, if that makes sense.
Are you telling me that we are we're stealing someone else's idea? Is this a form of plagiarism?
We are honoring their idea. It's a homage.
Okay, yes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I like their format of the draft, and I think it creates pretty interesting episodes. I've been kind of a fan of their podcast style. Their drafts are very, very long. I think their average length of a draft is something like 3 or 4 hours. We are not going to do that. This is probably going to be more like 20 minutes, 25 minutes. So we'll see how that goes. So have you prepared at all for this draft? Did you kind of highlight certain favorites that you hope to get on the list?
You know, I mean, to have done that properly, of course, I should have done that. I did not.
Okay, well,
but
we'll see how it goes.
I have the list of all the films we've seen. So, yeah, let's...
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about Giallos in general now that we've gone through it? I know in the past you've mentioned that you do prefer them over Poliziotteschi's, and we've gone over Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Blood and Black Lace. Those were in the 60s and the early 70s. Now we're in 2001. How do you feel about Giallos in general?
I mean, I still prefer them over Poliziotteschi's. Just mainly, I think it's. I mean, Poliziotteschi's are like cop dramas, but on crack, on extra macho, and Giallo instead is like murder mystery with a little bit of horror. I'm not a huge police drama kind of guy, unless it's like very procedural. I do like those very like procedural stuff, but I mean when it's just like, just kind of a beat 'em up game, not a huge fan. So I mean Giallo, of course, I'll enjoy more. I think sometimes they get a little bit repetitive, the Giallo genre, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, looking at the list too, we have seen an awful lot of Giallos. We watched, I think, 7 Polizioteschi's, and we have gone through something like 22 Giallis on this draft. So that is quite a lot of them too. So yeah, I mean, I'm a fan of both genres, of course. But I do think Giallos are probably the one with the more broad mass appeal. I think it's the one that you could show to more people. Polizioteschi's are a lot of fun, for me at least. But it's very easy for me to see why it's a genre that has not caught on in quite the same way as Giallos or maybe some of the spaghetti westerns have. Anyways, let's get on to the draft. So I have a good old-fashioned coin here. We're going to do an old-fashioned coin flip to see who is drafting first or second. So Iñaki, you want to call it heads or tails?
Let's do heads.
Okay. And of course I dropped it. And we have heads. So you can either choose to draft the spots at 2, 4, 6, and 7, or 1, 3, and 5.
I'll do 1, 3, and 5.
Okay. So you will be picking the higher picks, but you have a few less picks on the list. Okay, so that means I am going first. So I will... That the Screen Drafts podcast, they have 2 hosts of it, so they have the option of like sending it to them and then they announce it. But because it's just the 2 of us, we're just going to straight up announce what picks we are doing when we get to it. So let me look. You and I are both looking at the same Google Doc, looking at the list of films that we have to choose from. So at number 7, let's see. I want to make room for some of those. I'm going to take House with the Laughing Windows. For me, at least, this is fun because it's partly unique. I really like the rural setting there. I was kind of just deciding between this and Don't Torture Ducklings. So that one has the restoration of church art. I also like how this has more of a horror feel. I think a lot of these Giallos, you were just talking about how some of them have more of the horror slasher feel to it, and the ones have less of that. This one definitely has a very distinct horror and even like rural feel to it that I think is different from most of the kind of urban set Giallos. Just a really eerie atmosphere. The score of it also really haunting, stuff like that. So I'm a fan of this film. Any thoughts on House with the Laughing Windows? Would you like to use your veto on it?
No, I don't think a veto is necessary. This one, I mean, I'm trying to remember a little bit. This one's the one with the where the detective basically comes from out of town, and it's just like a very secluded, like rural town, correct?
Yeah, it's a rural town, and there's like the priest at the end turns out to be like the sister of the one painter.
Yeah.
Who they had gone to Brazil, and then it has lots of screaming and stuff like that. A little bit more of a slow burn as far as Giallos go, less body count.
And this one was it? Am I wrong, or this one? Am I remembering wrong, or this one's the one where basically, the detective was almost like left by his own means, right? Like he.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's not a detective; it's a restorer of.
Oh, yeah, right.
Sorry, not a detective, but yes, he's definitely kind of off on his own.
Yeah, and like there's a moment where like he's sort of running around, I remember, and just like no one was there to help him. It almost felt like what's it called? One of those cult horrors, almost in the sense that the town kind of just ignored everything that was happening.
Yeah, that's a good call. A little bit of that cult or folklore vibe to it too, where you're just not totally sure who's on his side or who's not. So, in my opinion, a pretty good paranoid one. I think it's one of the better Giallos and definitely one to check out. It's not done by any of the big main Gialli directors, done by Pupi Avati. But for me, at least, it's a big recommendation. I do really enjoy this film, and it's one I definitely enjoyed watching it the second time when we brought it onto the podcast more than the initial time I'd seen it.
Yeah, I think I clearly need to rewatch it, but I agree that this one was one of the more interesting and different kind of films.
Okay, so it is my pick again for number 6, and then I will go to you. So for number 6, I'm going to be taking 1963's Blood and Black Lace. For me, this is, or 1964 rather. This is very early. This is the one with just fantastic colors. For me, this would probably rank a little bit higher than number 6 if you left it to me, but if left it solely to me. But I want to make sure it's on this list. So just a very landmark Giallo. I think the colors pop. I think it's still one of the most visually arresting Giallos, right up there with the best of Argento and stuff like that, and just the inventive camera work and stuff. I think some of the acting still comes off a little wooden and stiff at times, but I think it more than makes up for it with just a lot of like the way that scenes are set up, and it is, I believe, runs between 80 and 90 minutes, so it's nice and short as well. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so would you like to veto this? Any thoughts on Blood and Black Lace?
Boy, I mean, this was literally the second Giallo film we watched.
Yeah, it was before any Argentos.
Yeah, I mean, because the first one was The Girl Who Knew Too Much by the same director. Exactly. And they're just quite a huge contrast going from a black and white Giallo to a color one.
A very full color one too.
Yeah,
like has quite the palette.
No, I don't think I will veto it, because I think you know it's a good Giallo to have, in that I feel like it's sort of the standard
right.
of Giallo. Like most of the rules of how your average Giallo should be are in this film, because the previous one, The Girl Who Knew Too Much, feels a little bit more Hitchcockian, while this one has more of that own Italian flair.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. And I think it clearly is probably the number one inspiration on the future Argento films. We talk about him and having just like that fully saturated color scheme for like Deep Red and Suspiria. Not a Giallo, but it's like I think it still holds up really well. It's a film that has very clear strengths and weaknesses to it. But I think it's one that I can definitely rewatch every few years, just because it's so visually arresting. Okay, well, it is your pick, Iñaki, for number 5.
Yeah, this is
So we have yet to have any Dario Argento or Lucio Fulci or Sergio Martino on the list.
Right.
But yeah, we also have a few Gialli not directed by them that we have talked about.
Sorry, I'm trying to figure out which one would be.
No, that's okay. I'll just briefly talk, and you just chime in when you're ready.
Actually, yeah, so could we discuss a couple of these ones? I'm looking at the Martino ones. Could you remind me a little bit of The Strange Vice?
Yeah. So Strange Vice and All of the Colors of the Dark we paired together on an episode. Strange Vice is a little bit more of a tricky one to describe. It's one where there are a bunch of serial killings going on, and then basically they hatch like a plot for the inheritance money, and so they kind of copycat the serial killings.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's the one where they try to gas the woman, the main character.
With the ice cubes. Yeah, the ice cube scene.
And then All the Colors of Dark.
That one's same cast basically as Strange Vice, except that one has like the satanic cult.
Oh, that one was the one that had like lots of sex.
Yes.
Got it.
Strange Vice also had a fair amount, but this one had like group sex.
Yeah, and then Torso was
is the most different. It's the one where the protagonist like gets hurt, and so she gets like knocked out, and then she like wakes up, and all of her friends have basically been.
Oh, this one is the bunch of girls who are at a countryside. Yeah. Okay,
a really memorable third act.
Yeah. I just wanted to. Okay, so even though I asked about those movies, I will pick Don't Torture a Duckling.
Okay.
I believe that Don't Torture a Duckling is probably one of the first movies that we saw where you have where no one was off the list from the killer. Children died, adults died, but more importantly, even though the killer was fairly obvious, you had a priest. It kind of it was that classic weird criticism on the Catholic Church and the priest's relationship with children, and it predates finding out that priests really have a disturbing relationship with children. So
you mean it predates Spotlight?
Predates Spotlight. I mean, it predates actually that newspaper article that Spotlight is based on, which opened opened the floodgates of, oh shit, the Catholic Church is kind of shitty. So yeah, I would say don't torture a duckling is it's an interesting movie. Also, it was pretty fun.
It has a great jumping off the cliff scene at the end.
Exactly.
Or dummy falling off the cliff scene and getting its face torn up.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a really good pick. I like this film a lot too. This and House with the Laughing Windows, I think, might be the only two more rural set Gialli here. So I was tempted to pick this too. And I think the Fulci films, this was a hugely controversial film at the time because of kind of its criticisms of the Catholic Church and stuff like that in Italy. I think it holds up really well. I think it's a must-watch for any Fulci fan, anyone that's seen his more gory work, which oddly enough we actually haven't brought onto the show. But I think this is a really good film and definitely a top flight Giallo.
Mm-hmm. It's not hard for a movie talking about Christianity to be controversial. I mean, do you know, like, when Dogma came out in 1999, there were massive protests in many Christian places. So, I mean, it's fucking Dogma. I don't know if you remember that movie.
That's true. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, especially to rile up even like the 0.1% of Christians, which is enough to make the headlines. It does not take that much these days. Well, cool. Anything else to add on Don't Torture a Duckling?
Nope.
Okay. Let's see. So you picked a Fulci there. So we have one Fulci, one Bava.
Actually, I will add one more thing. This one, and then The Psychic, were the least sleazy, the less sleazy films of Fulci, with like little gore, little all that stuff that Fulci is so well known for. Yeah,
and his third Giallo on the list, New York Ripper, lets it all hang out. So compared to those films, I mean, and notably, New York Ripper comes out after he had done his kind of most successful trilogy, which is definitely known for gore and post-zombie and stuff like that. Okay, well, with number 4, you know what? I'm going back to Mr. Fulci, and I'm going to be taking 1977's The Psychic, because I really enjoy this film. I think this is probably in my top 3 or 4 Giallos, and it's just one that I really I just kind of connect with on it's just one that very fully immerses me. Has a really good, very involving Fabio Frizzi score that's just a little bit different than the other scores that people like Morricone and stuff like that were cranking out at the time. I find it affecting that the husband is the killer. Spoilers. It's just good atmosphere, very Hitchcocky feel. I'm a big fan of Hitchcock too, so it's one that kind of checks all the boxes, and I think shows that Fulci is just a very, very gifted storyteller. Do you want to use your veto on the psychic, and any thoughts on it?
I don't remember it very well. Could you give me a little bit more on the movie?
So if you remember right, Jennifer O'Neill plays the protagonist, who basically is having like these visions in like tunnels and stuff like that. And it slowly comes to her, and then she ends up in a wall where she's like, a murder has happened, and she thinks she's seeing the past, but she's actually seeing the future.
Yeah. Now I remember. Yeah, this one's pretty interesting. I'm not gonna veto it.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of these Gialli can definitely run together, and we've been doing these films for a while, so I don't really blame you for getting a little twisted up, especially stuff like the Strange Vice and All the Colors of the Dark, where you're working with the same cast. And so anyways, it is your pick, unless you'd like to add anything to the psychic.
I mean, I like the psychic was a great mystery because, as you mentioned yourself, like in the entire movie, you're assuming that they're investigating something from the past, and instead it's something in the future. It makes it really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's a unique format for the Giallo, and I'm going to read off the list while you can come up with your next pick. So at number 7, I selected The House with the Laughing Windows, 1976. At number 6, I selected Blood and Black Lace of Mario Bava's seminal Giallo, 1964. Number 5, Iñaki selected Don't Torture a Duckling, 1972. Lucio Fulci's rural Giallo about young boys being killed. The only Golden Age Giallo on the list so far. And number 4, The Psychic, I selected about Jennifer O'Neill and Johnny Garco, where a woman is having psychic visions that she thinks are the past, but are actually the future.
All right, I think I'm going to pick... I'm going to pick The Strange Vice of Mrs. Ward.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I mean, this movie actually, despite the title, I did remember quite fondly in the sense that it was sort of a fun movie where you didn't know where the film was going. It had great locations, which made it very beautiful to watch. Although it was a little bit standard in other ways, it was also... I'm number 3. That's pick 3. Whoops, it's a little bit high. Oh well, you can veto it if you want. And it had a fun ending.
Yeah, the ice cube scene is one of the absolute best and most clever scenes in Giallo, or period, and it's just an incredible scene. I go back and forth on my own Sergio Martino favorites. I tend to favor Torso slightly more than this film, but I think this one's very good, and also it kind of represents that golden era of Giallo well. So while it's a little high for my taste, I'm not going to veto it. I don't really mind it. I do quite enjoy this film too, and it's nice to have a Sergio Martino on the list too.
All right.
Yeah. So that is number 3. Curiously enough, we have not yet to draft a Dario Argento film. I suspect those are coming up now. So with number 2, I am going to be selecting The Scream of Giallo, the meta Gialli, where there is a writer who you follow, and eventually we find out that the writer is the killer. Tenebrae from 1982. Just a great, the most 1980s Gialli, great kind of like Goblin, Claudio Simonetti score, and I think it is Argento writing at his most, kind of coming off of Suspiria and Inferno, but writing a very, planned out, well planned out, and less of a fever dream thing. And I think it's like right in the peak of like I'm going to show you what I can do. Some just fantastic kills and set pieces, and I think it works really well as kind of like a capper on Gialli. So definitely one of my favorites there. Yeah, would you like to veto? And any thoughts on Tenebrae?
Should I veto it? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I don't.
You can.
I mean, I could. I'm just like I'm not sure which ones would be the top three. You know, Tenebrae. It's funny because it is not a top two for me. The thing that I remember Tenebrae the most for is literally the man riding his bicycle on the freeway, and that's terrible to say.
So in my description of this, I should have written "man rides bicycle on freeway to JFK airport."
Yeah, it's all right. I looked up Wikipedia real quick just to remind myself what it was. It didn't say that part, but I was like, oh wait, yeah, I know about this.
You can veto. I will not fault you if you veto.
It's interesting because I know that Tenebrae is quite high for you for Argento. We did a ranking of Argento earlier.
We did, yeah.
2 weeks ago. I mean, 2 or 3 podcasts ago. I believe Tenebrae was either your number 1 or number 2 of Argento.
It was number 2, yeah.
It was number 2. So Deep Red, I'm assuming, was your number 1.
It is, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, if I don't veto and then I pick, Stage Fright Aquarius.
I mean, you can. I mean, there's so what? So if you veto, basically what would happen is I get the pick, right. So I can pick anything but Tenebrae, and then you pick your number 1.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I am not gonna use my veto.
Okay.
Because, but I want you to convince me. Actually, no, forget that. I want you to convince me why this has to be number 2.
Oh, geez. Well, I think it's just one of the very quintessential Gialli. I think it kind of like Scream is commenting on Giallo at a time too. I mean, it's called Tenebrae, and Argento had talked about the different mothers like Mater Tenebram and stuff like that. So I think seeing it as sort of like something that is speaking towards that sort of work and stuff like that, as well as identifying himself pretty clearly as the author who gets accused as being like misogynist and stuff like that. It's a film that for me grew a whole lot in my estimation. The second time I watched it, because the first time it was like my 4th or 5th Giallo that I watched, and then coming back to it after seeing a lot of it and basically all of Argento. For me, it's definitely like an all-timer as far as like being right up there with Deep Red. That Simonetti score, which is very, very different, the Goblin Simonetti score, which is very, very different from his work in Suspiria and Deep Red. So I really appreciate that. And I think it also has some of the best acting. The lead performance from Anthony Franciosa, I think it's one of the better performances for a director that is not known for getting good performances out of people. And just that full bloody ending with like the sculpture coming down, like the mise-en-scene where we have like the person lean down and the killer's behind them. I think it's literally the first film to do stuff like that. For me, it's just a really good film. So I do think your estimation of this film would go up a lot if you were to rewatch it in a couple of years.
Yeah, I believe I'm convinced enough that this should be number 2. In that you did a good job of that. I need to rewatch it. That's probably my takeaway on that, and I will leave it there. And then for number 1, though, I mean, number 1 pick is kind of difficult because there are a lot that I enjoyed. I mean, so before I go to number 1, I guess I will say like I want to talk a little bit about some that perhaps are in my memory early on.
We can also, after you finish drafting, we can also do near misses and just kind of run through them too if you'd like.
Yeah, I think we should do it before we pick number 1.
Sure, no problem.
Well, especially because I'm picking it.
Okay, yeah.
So I can stall as much as I want.
Well, I could veto you if I really don't like your selection. Like
all
if
right.
if you pick Cat of Nine Tails or Stendhal Syndrome, I'm definitely vetoing you.
All right, fair enough. Fair enough. I was not planning to pick those. All right, so Stage Fright Aquarius, not picking for number one, but a very, very memorable movie when it comes to Giallo. This is one of the later ones, not the latest one. It's not Sleepless, but it's one of the later ones, and it has a lot of intrigue, a lot of stupid ass decisions. Which gets closer to a horror film. Actually, in fact, I do believe that the horror genre at this point has, the slasher genre has fully infiltrated the Giallo genre. So it's sort of a fitting off each other. So it definitely has to get an honorable mention because I think it's like the it's the example of the world going around. Another honorable mention is New York Reaper. It's sleazy, scummy, it's as gross as it gets, but interestingly enough, it's fun to watch.
Honestly, of the Fulci ones, I was very close to picking New York Ripper. All three of the Fulcis we watched, I think, could have made the list easily. And
Yeah.
New York Ripper is the one that was left off. I also am a big fan of New York Ripper too.
Yeah, it's very memorable. Opera,
No doubt.
Opera, extremely memorable for its use of crows. You got the crow eye view, of course, and that's just it's just lovely fun. And I mean, Phenomena. Although that film itself is not very even, I would say its pacing is a little bit lackluster. It has a chimp going bonkers, and and a pool full of guts. I mean, what else do you want? And
Donald Pleasance? Yeah, let's throw a little Donald Pleasance at you too. You get a
know.
little bit of Loomis.
I know you get a little bit of Loomis, a little bit of just supernatural. Unfortunately, you also get a little bit of metal in your funeral scene.
Yeah.
And I mean, Birds with Crystal Plumage. There's some lovely transition scenes in that film. It's just very fun. I mean, this is one of the first movies we watched out of Giallo films, and I just still remember the phone call and where you get to follow the cable scene and with a little music. It's just a fun little movie. I think it's definitely. I mean, it would go number one, except for you get Deep Red, Rosso Profundo.
There you go.
And I mean, of course, that's the obvious one, and that's what you are going to pick as well. It does a little bit of everything. It has some beautiful scenes. It does a really good job at playing with the use of mirrors. Its explanation is not overbearing, which is always nice. It's just a very complete film. Although, granted, with Argento, I do find, to me, Bird with Crystal Plumage is pretty high up.
Interesting. Mm-hmm.
Generally speaking, if I remember the movie well, after a really long time, I think this is probably a good movie. Maybe that's a really bad way of analyzing movies, but yeah.
Yeah,
but it's my favorite out of the pick, right?
Yeah, well, that's fair enough. Yeah, you named a lot of my also rans too. If you had vetoed Tenebrae, I would have picked Opera too. That would have been my backup Argento to pick there. Bird with the Crystal Plumage, as you mentioned, has some really, really handsome imagery. And if you're talking about the most unforgettable Giallo, I don't know if it's absolutely number one, but New York Ripper is towards the top. That is not one that you're going to get mixed up with any other Giallis at all. With your quacking killer. Yeah. Yeah. And Stage Fright Aquarius, you might forget a lot of that film, but you're not going to forget the killer with the owl mask and stuff like that. Yeah. So kind of your ideal mix of slasher, Giallo, mayhem.
And you know what? And And we're gonna jump onto this film after we finish this list. Sleepless. It's not that bad for being from a Giallo from 2001.
Yeah, well, we will be talking about that very shortly. We'll talk about how it fits compared to kind of the other Argento Gialli we just watched a month or two ago with Trauma and Stendhal Syndrome. Because Argento kind of goes back to the well on this one. Are you ready to move on to the Sleepless portion of this episode?
You tell me.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so we are going to be talking about Dario Argento's Welcome to the New Millennium Giallo hit Sleepless. This film was quite successful. I did not look up the synopsis, so I'm going to load that right now. I have the synopsis from Trauma on here for some reason. So let's see what we got here. A retired police detective and a young amateur sleuth team up to find a serial killer who's resumed a killing spree in Turin, Italy after a 17-year period.
Where you get the what's your source?
IMDb.
IMDb. Good old IMDb.
Yeah.
All right.
So this film was a success at the time. This is his follow-up to Phantom of the Opera, which I am mercifully not going to bring on to the podcast and make you watch because it is not a terribly enjoyable film in my opinion.
Wait, you mean the movie with Gerard Butler?
Who is in Phantom of the Opera? I forget. Let's see who is in this. Well, Dario Argento, of course, and Julian Sands. It's not a good movie. In fact, I kind of like it even less than Stendhal Syndrome, which we already know that I am not a huge fan of. It was he was originally supposed to do a sequel called Dark Glasses, which he actually lost the rights of for a while, but apparently he gained them back because that is Giallo coming out next month. I don't believe it is a sequel anymore to this film, but I think he took kind of the basics of the story, which he wrote back in this era. That was originally supposed to be a sequel to Sleepless, actually. I don't know how you'd do a sequel to this film, but interesting. This film on Letterboxd is rated 3.1 with 3,200 people seeing it, compared to Trauma. Under half the amount of people have seen this film compared to Trauma, and that film has a 3.0 score. So it's rated, somewhere in the middle of Argento's film. And some people regard this as one of his last good to great films. Other people will talk about Stendhal Syndrome. Iñaki, for you said some kind things just a few minutes ago about it. How did you like Sleepless?
Well, I put it above Stendhal Syndrome for sure.
Good. Me too.
I might even put it above Trauma.
Okay. So you like this film?
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it more than those two. I think it's a very classic Giallo, but it actually feels very modern as well. By modern, I mean the early noughts. It feels like a 90s movie more than the early noughts, but it feels... The Stendhal Syndrome feels like a 1970s... Sorry, not Stendhal Syndrome. Trauma feels like a 1970s Giallo. Stendhal Syndrome feels like a 1970s Giallo, but somehow now. While Sleepless actually finally felt like something different. It utilizes elements of, the fucking modern world. and yet still tells a very good story.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, for me at least, I actually like this one. I think this is my favorite of like the post-opera Argento films. I think I like this easily more than anything else he's done. He did some pretty mediocre work after this film too. So my hope is that Dark Glasses is more akin to this than anything. And for me, it feels a lot like a film that is bringing the band back together. You got good old Goblin coming back, bringing the band back together in their case, as they had been broken up in order to record the soundtrack for this. You have some familiar old faces. You have like killer dwarves. You have like references to different animals and stuff like that, pretty clearly references to animal killing. You even have like the dwarf wrote crime fiction, so a bit of a nod to Tenebrae and stuff like that. It's like filled with different stuff that if you've seen a lot of the Argento early work, which we of course have because we brought on basically all of it onto the podcast, you can sort of recognize those as little tips and stuff like that. So for me, it feels like him kind of going back to the well, but also being a little bit more self-aware of it too, but also having a little bit more of a modern twist to it. This does not feel or look like Bird with the Crystal Plumage or any of his like 70s Gialli. It has kind of, as you said, more of that 90s updated look to it. So I do quite enjoy this film. I don't think it's his absolute best work, but I do like it. I think it's definitely one of the better late Giallos.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, when it comes to the plot, it's at the end of the day, it's actually an extremely simple Giallo plot. I mean, you have lots of elements for sure, but by simple, I mean it really goes back to the basics plot-wise. But the elements that it uses, and that's where I sort of enjoyed that update, is you have all your classic elements, a really good mystery. I mean, Hitchcockian mystery, if you will. I mean, it's almost down to to the basics of like The Girl Who Knew Too Much, in the sense that it's simplicity, I guess, or of just not being even trying to be a horror, just being a mystery is there. However, you have that like fast train, you got the tram, you got like just a bunch of as I mentioned before, modern elements, cell phone use, even the discussion between old school investigation and new school investigation, of utilizing DNA data and blah blah blah. It just, I really enjoyed all of that, and then the story itself, as I said before, it's a simple story with very gory death, very brutal kills actually. That just made everything sort of make sense.
Yeah, and a lot of that done practically too. I might add, after some of the he did a lot of practical too in Stendhal Syndrome, but he did use a little bit of CG there. But yeah, I agree. I think this is definitely the most successful mystery of his 90s and later Giallo. It feels like Trauma to me maybe hints and is a little bit mysterious at times. Stendhal Syndrome just feels different. I think this one kind of creates that feel of those early Giallo mysteries of kind of like who did it, and it's probably one of the characters that we know already. So in that sense, I think it is quite successful in that sense too. And I'm glad you noted kind of like the changing of the times and stuff like that, because I think that is one of the things that is a little bit different about this film too. This film was released 31 years after his debut, Bird with the Crystal Plumage. So he was 30, I believe, when that film was released, and now he is 61 when this is released. And I feel like you can sort of identify, you see him identifying a little bit more with the Max von Sydow character, who, ironically enough, looks like he came straight off the set of The Exorcist, except now he's properly aged up rather than having great makeup as he does in that film, because he looks very similar. And I think he's starting to just identify with like this sort of character who is having some memory issues where sometimes it's there, sometimes it's not. And he also has like a bunch of different stuff where it's like clear that stuff is changing. Like von Sydow plays ex-Chief Commissioner Moretti, and it sounds like in the past he was kind of a hotshot, and now they have like this new technology and stuff like that where they're monitoring a lot of phones and stuff like that. And we see kind of like, I feel like Argento will always also kind of go out in the world and he'll have like these 2 or 3 just very random things that he'll observe, and he'll be like, I'm going to put that in the movie. Like we have like an American restaurant with like American flags posted everywhere. We also have like non-alcoholic beer somehow randomly making a reference here. So it feels like things that are kind of like new and updated, definitely of the era that it's in, but also kind of what is effective about the film is still kind of like those old school things, like that mystery, having really brutal kills, and those things that are things that made the very early Argento films, the Animal trilogy as well as Deep Red, very successful too.
Yeah, I agree. Although it's funny because like some of the stuff he picks out, actually, he even utilized it well. I mean, the American Restaurant, not so much, but like the non-alcoholic beer, actually was not only did he pluck something from the era, but it actually had a plot point there.
True, it did. It tasted different, so they didn't think that it was poisoned initially.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, and how did you like, because we're talking about him a little bit, kind of the lead here, Max von Sydow, in this role?
Wait, that's
the older,
the priest,
retired commissioner. Yeah.
In my notes, I have it as Father Marin.
Yeah. How'd you like Father Marin?
He was great. He was fucking great. It was really odd. I mean, there are some directorial quirks here, of course. I've complained, or not complained, but I've observed that Argento's mastery of directing is not to the full, not the most developed, and it never was, and it will never will be, which is fine. But so his character, I mean, like there are moments where it's really fun to see him as, this man who keeps on forgetting and sort of talks to his parrot. Half the time he seems like the crazy wise old man. The other half time that he seems like just a smart cop. I think in this case the actor carries more the dialogue. I think in hands of a worse actor, this would have been less believable. And I even have an analogy for this. Makes me think of this, obviously not a very straight comparison, but when you think of the old Star Wars, not the old Star Wars, sorry, the prequels, the ones that I consider the worst, maybe except for 7. In the prequels, the dialogue was bad, and the directing was god awful. However, when Christopher Lee, I believe is the name of the actor,
yeah,
when he had a scene, or when the actor who plays the Emperor Palpatine, I forgot his name, when they had a scene, they were still spewing the terrible dialogue that George Lucas wrote, and they were still being directed by George Lucas. However, whenever they were on those scenes saying this, whatever they're saying, you bought it. You fucking bought it, because it was just so good. And I think this is where I give credit to Father Marin. That Father Marin did a really great job at saying some silly things that I believe Argento thought, oh, this is how I show that the man is, becoming senile, but not there yet. This is like, it was a little bit too much, but Father Marin was able to bring it back to being believable.
Well, there you go. I didn't expect to hear a Star Wars prequel comparison here, coming out right around the same time too. But I think you are absolutely spot on there. I think von Sydow is really, really good in this film. No thanks to Argento. I think it's him carrying just a lot of weight and just like committing fully to the performance and really, really doing a great job of selling it. Not unlike a great actor like Christopher Lee and mediocre Star Wars dialogue too. So I think that comparison is pretty much exact. I don't have much to add to it. But yeah, I mean, I think von Sydow is a huge reason why this film works. I think his performance here is not unlike Donald Pleasance's in Phenomena. In fact, probably even a little better. And the fact that they use him quite a bit. He's not used in the first 20 minutes or the last 20 minutes of this film, but he's in kind of the rest of it. So he has a fair amount of screen time, so he is used a lot. And I think without him, I think this film is significantly worse. Especially if we think of kind of the performances in the previous two 90s films that we watched. The lead performance in particular, I think, were pretty lacking. And I think the fact that he thankfully didn't cast his daughter in this, I think does help him a fair amount.
I mean, could you imagine if his daughter had been casted as Gloria? Oof. Oof.
Yeah, or like recast the lead part, regender it as a woman instead, and then she's the lead.
But yeah, if again,
Yeah,
little Argento was lead, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, she's just not very good in her dad's movies, which is weird. But I think, yeah. How do you feel about the rest of the acting performances? For me, at least, my only note there is like, some are okay. Mostly, it benefits from not being his daughter.
I mean, I think the actual killer is a little bit overacted, and by a little,
You think?
By a little bit, I mean a little bit too much.
You think, Miyaki? Yeah, he's like trying to talk in like a kid's voice. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it could be the writing. Can always be the writing. But it just took you out of the movie. So I mean, you never you never know if it was the writing, the directing, or the actor. But it took you out of this a scene that could have been very impactful. I thought that the main actor was okay.
Yeah, I agree. He's probably better than the previous two films that I keep talking about, but I mean, Von Sydow is clearly like carries the weight here.
Well, and I actually thought that the girl who plays Gloria does a pretty good job too. Actually, I think she was one of the better ones.
Interesting.
She had lots of little subtle moments that I quite enjoyed. There were moments where, because I mean, most of the actors you remember for when they're talking things like that. I mean, with Argento, it's either they're overacting or they're underacting. And with her, I felt like she actually there's the scene where I forget the name of the homeless character.
Leone.
So with Leone, they're gonna pick up her instruments. They get in the car, and her expressions are more like, I'm in a hurry because I need to get the instruments because we need to do whatever we need to do. And Leone is there, so like, the main character, for no fucking reason, is like, yeah, we can give you a ride. The dude didn't even ask. And you see her face, she didn't say anything, but her face alone said, what the fuck? What the fuck? And I thought that was very lovely. It was very lovely to see that from an Argento film. Of someone just acting with their face.
Right. And Argento is probably not... He probably puts love and care into how the killer's hands are moving, but it's pretty obvious at this point that Argento is not an actor's director and is not giving much direction on good acting and stuff like that. So, yeah, no, I mean, she was good in that scene. I will give you that. I'm glad you brought up that example. For me, other than that, I mean... Yeah, she was fine. For me, none of the actors really rubbed me the wrong way. I even kind of enjoy the killer's dubbing at the end because it's like so over the top and silly. But it's definitely not good in terms of good acting.
Yeah, it's just it's not in the same tone as the rest of the film.
Right. Okay, well, let's talk a little bit more about things that we normally talk about on Gialli's. This soundtrack was bringing Goblin back together. Any thoughts on the soundtrack here?
I still have mixed feelings for Goblin.
Okay. Were they too much here? Too little?
No. Actually, so in many moments, they were just right. I mean, for example, on the train scene, they were amazing. At the train scene, the Goblin was just really good. I mean, also the train scene overall is just a very good scene.
Outstanding. Yeah, absolutely.
And Uh-huh.
I think if you take any, I think that scene is probably right up there with some of his earlier films. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so the train scene, very, 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 like Goblin there worked really well. Goblin worked in other moments also very, very well. There were other, but then there were other times where maybe the shift was too jarring. So, for instance, when they believe that the killer's gonna kill Gloria because she's dressed as the Black Swan and playing the Black Swan on her harp. You have that intercut with Goblin on the main character driving his car, and it just didn't work very well. Like that cut, no, and normally you would. I mean, a fast pace versus the slow pace scene usually works, but Goblin, that Goblin soundtrack did not, in my opinion.
Interesting.
That was, I mean, one of the few times that it didn't. But I mean, it did in other moments. As I said before, the train, amazing there. I mean, the train just, everything works.
Yeah. It's like one of those scenes where like Argento's back, baby. It's just like he totally nailed that scene. Yeah, I mean, I think I mostly like the Goblin score. I don't think it's like their best score by any means. I think I like 80% of it. But real missed opportunity there by Argento by not crank the volume to 11 and playing it during the funeral. I mean, he clearly should have just taken his notes from Phenomena and just cranked Goblin to the max volume there.
Well, this I know you're joking, but this movie also doesn't have many moments in which you can sort of breathe and take in the loss.
True. That's true.
There's a lot of ellipses, if you will, between the kill and the next scene, which can be good. It depends on what you want to do. I think for this movie it worked, and that was the problem with Phenomena, is that Phenomena did not do the ellipses between the kill of the character. Also, it made the character very important for you. So the death of the character actually was a sad moment. And Argento knew that, and that's why he has a scene for the funeral that is slow, that you can soak it in. However, Argento did not, he forgot to change the soundtrack at that moment. I think that's what happened. He just kind of forgot, and when the movie came out, it's like, oh, fuck, there's metal in this scene. Oh, all right. It was on purpose, sure. In this movie, there was no moment in which you could have a respite. So, like, yeah, I mean, there was one funeral scene, but it was not really a funeral scene. It was just, I mean, it was not a sad scene per se. It was just.
It was a random character. I don't remember whose funeral it was, and like the main point of that funeral scene too was like the body was like messed with.
Yeah, the body of the
was that
dwarf
dancer? Oh, okay.
Yeah,
got it. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I'm glad to have Goblin back for the most part. I think it mostly works, as you said, on the train opening and stuff. You're right. Argento does have a couple questionable uses, but I do think it is no worse than any of his other later films here. It's not quite up to his usage of Goblin and something like Deep Red and that, but yeah, I like it. All right, so let's see what else. So if you have anything else that you thought worked really well with the film too, for me at least, there's a couple set pieces that I do want to get to. We usually kind of get to those a little bit later towards the end of the podcast. The cinematography too is something we often talk about. This director of photography was Ronnie Taylor, who had worked with Argento previously on Opera. Looks very different than Opera overall, but I think Argento is probably going for a different look to the film, and had won a best Oscar for cinematography on the film Gandhi too. So a pretty celebrated cinematographer here. Any thoughts? Anything else you would like to cover on that stuff, or would you like to move on to set pieces?
I mean, I thought the cinematography was it's interesting you're bringing up the opera versus this one. In and of course thinking of Gandhi, because Gandhi is a movie that was very big, and like that's where cinematographers usually shine.
Yeah, location shooting, that sort of thing, and this film's very different.
Yeah, this movie has. I mean, I cannot even remember one location shooting. It's a little bit claustrophobic almost. But that I keep on harping back on the train scene. That train scene, everything worked out. Just fucking everything.
Well, what? Yeah, why don't we move on to the set pieces then? Because yeah, for me there are two, and probably in particular the one, which is the train scene, which I think is just really really good, and it goes on for a while too. It's like a 20-minute set piece to open the film. But yeah, do you want to describe what you love about the train scene?
I mean, so the setup in general, right? You have this girl who realizes that she accidentally took the folder of the killer, and realizes that, oh shit, I was with the killer. And from there, just her calling her friend, having the cop, all of that is just a really good setup of like, okay, so we got a mystery. This guy, the killer, knows who she is, He's gonna kill her. And although we have to suspend disbelief, there has to be a little bit of suspension of disbelief here, because how the fuck did the killer get to the train on time? How the fuck did that happen? Sure. If we ignore that, the scene just works out really well, right? The girl figures out where he is. She starts running. She notices that the cop that was supposed to protect her is out. I thought he was dead. People thought he was dead.
I thought he was dead too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But what I love is just all the in the train scenes, the movement, the camera following, then the camera being outside the train. Once again, doing the same process. You get to see her running through the train. You don't never get to see the killer, but and this is where the music works out really well, and the rain works out really well. So train going at fast speed, music blasting, and the girl just like running and just seeing from outside. All of that is just works out really well. The little pauses where she hides in that weird crevice.
Yeah, where she almost gets just like swallowed up by the train, where she's hiding there, which is a good hiding spot.
Yeah, she should have stayed there, but she wanted her evidence and her stuff. And then of course, her getting her finger chopped off, and then her being killed, and you get to seeing it from outside as the killer is lowering the blinds. That is definitely a mix of directing and cinematography as well. So all of that just made it a very lovely scene.
Yeah, just incredibly inspired. Really long too. I mean, it's like impressive how long he can do that. I think it's still probably the most tense scene in the film, although you do kind of get a little bit of tension towards the end there. One other thing I like about it too is that like the traditional way that these films would open too is like then her friend would probably be like the main protagonist, because at this point you still don't even know who the protagonist is. In characteristic kind of Argento fashion, we have like a cryptic opening where we know there's something about a murder in 1982, so 19 years ago. And now how does that connect to this? We're not totally sure, so we think maybe her friend, who then has like kind of an argument with the parking attendant and stuff like that, we think that might be the lead, and then he kills her off too. So it's almost like the double misdirect there. And it takes a while before we even get introduced to our lead. So I like that aspect too. But yeah, I love the atmosphere of like just that heavy, drenching rain and that intensity that it has going on. It's just one of the best ways to open a film.
Mm-hmm. Now, the inner Nathaniel comes out of course, in in this part of the conversation. And the movie is set in 2001, and it actually utilizes cell phones. They do show up. So I was a little bit surprised when the girl is at the train station, the friend, and is like, "Are there any cops here?" After she almost fell, and the guy was like, "No, there's no cops here." One, surprising. I've never seen a train station without cops. Maybe Italy is very special. Doubt it. But then the second thing is, okay, there's no cops. She decides to just go to her car that has been moved, as opposed to, pull out her cell phone and dial 112. I believe that's the EU number for the cops. And just wait there. Just fucking wait there. Again, this is Ian Nathaniel coming out.
Yeah. Not to mention how the heck the killer made the train. I mean...
Oh, well, I already said that. I already pointed that out.
That
you have to suspend your disbelief.
I mean, maybe that's like a TSA pre-check ad. I don't know. I mean...
Yeah.
He had some sort of magic juju to get on that.
Or how did he get out of the train, knew what her car was, and move her car to the other side?
True.
Like, all of that.
Yeah. And why did he move her car too? I don't even totally know.
Oh, no, that to have it further away from, the main entrance, so the kill would be a little bit more subtle.
I see.
But
yeah.
But again, how did he know her car? How, all of that, I mean, makes no sense. I mean, actually, it would make sense had it been like, instead of being the guy being a lawyer, he was a cop.
Oh, you're right. That would have made sense. Then it would have given him like kind of a way to navigate stuff around. Mm-hmm. Good call. They should have brought that into the writer's room. Okay, yeah. Well, I think that's a great way to open. Good use of Goblin during that scene too. Were there other set pieces that stood out to you? The other one that I have on my list is more of a shot than like a protracted set piece like the train, but is the one at the performance where we just kind of have that slow pan over the carpet.
That's what I was going to bring up.
Yeah. Really, I mean, it's just one of those great shots that I feel like Argento is just really gifted at coming up with, even at this stage of his career, where it just kind of like slowly moves there. We get kind of like the chaos of the stage, good use of sound as we hear people rushing in and out. We see just footsteps, and then it ends with just like a decapitated head falling on the ground. Somewhat fake looking, but overall, I approve. It's just a really, really nice way. And I think at the beginning you sort of realize what's happening or how this is going to end, but it's just such a wonderful, stylish, visual way to kind of do it, and it's quite thrilling, at least for me.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I didn't know how it was going to end. It was a fun ride.
Oh, okay.
I mean, because if you haven't seen it and you're a sick bastard who watches podcasts that of movies that you have not watched.
You sick fuck.
If you're that type of, psychopath, I will paint the picture of what we're talking about. So there's the dolly shot that is just moving very smoothly, but instead of pointing at anything, it's pointing at a straight, long rug. A beautiful Persian long rug, I believe, at a theater's hallway. And all you see is people's feet as they're moving around. There's the play. There's two swans. The black swan, who is Gloria, who we already know she survived because she's making out with the main character. And the white swan, which you hear her. She's like, oh God, I gotta get to the stage. Oh God, I gotta prepare. Things like that. As you have the chaos, as you're mentioning. And all of this chaos that you hear is not what you see, because you only see this beautiful rug as this dolly shot that has no jitteries or anything, just a straight dolly shot, just moves, panning until you get to see her feet lifted off the air as she's being choked and getting her head cut off. You don't see actually any of the murder, you just see that head plopping. All of that is just a beautiful painting, and it is my number 2 best favorite scene in the entire scene and set piece of the entire movie.
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, good description there. Any other set pieces beyond those two you want to bring up?
I mean, there's some set pieces that I found confusing, purposefully done, but purposefully so, but confusing. You got the death of the mother of the dwarf.
Where she just kind of falls from the high up place.
Yeah, and I had like this is one of those moments where I think Argento abused his power of ellipsis or cutting, if you will, because you have the mother arguing with Father Marin, who is not a father, he's an ex-police officer, but he's arguing with Father Marin. Father Marin's like, I never saw the gun. She's like, oh, if you don't believe me, whatever. And she kind of storms off, goes upstairs, sees the shadow of a dwarf that may or may not be her son, and she falls down. And then we cut off to a complete different scene. Unrelated. No reactions. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, like what was Father Marin's reaction?
We don't know. Because the next scene, he's by himself just chatting with the fucking parrot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in that sense, that's classic Giallo, classic Argento in kind of a bad way. Just clearly does not care as much about flow and stuff like that. And definitely one of the more uneven moments. Yeah. Any other set pieces you want to bring up?
I mean, I do like how the father dies. How Father Marin dies. I do like how I forget the name of the actual main character.
I thought talking about the end, where the father of the killer dies.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying. No, Father Marin.
Yeah, where he has a heart attack.
Yeah,
interesting.
I like how that's set up. That's one of those like fake outs, but with real consequences. So. You know, because you have the guy sees the dwarf, who we all quote unquote believe that is the killer, grabs a gun, starts shooting at the dwarf. It's unclear whether or not he's a fucking terrible shot, which would be really disappointing for a detective, or if the dwarf is supernatural, who knows? But yes, all of that. I mean, there's a lot of great suspense in that scene. Because I mean, again, lights off, dwarf moving, man shooting. What's going to happen? The dwarf is not dying, and then you think that we're going to see another bloody kill, something fun, even though it's outside the rules of the nursery rhyme. But instead, you have the man dying of a heart attack.
Yeah, which was actually set up decently well for an Argento film, at least, where we know that he has heart issues. Interesting. I'm surprised you mentioned that. I wasn't sure. I thought you might feel a little bit like you did about Sonny Landham's character in Predator, who didn't get his chance to, where we didn't see his face off with the Predator on the log where he decides to sacrifice himself. I thought you'd want to see something a little bloodier.
Well, no, because at least we get to see him die.
That's true. And there's something also a little bit, I don't know, it'd be a little bit unknoble for Father Marin to go out like super bloody. So he kind of goes out in a fairly, he goes out in a bloodless way.
Yeah, he goes out. He goes out figuring out actually who the killer was. Or who the killer isn't. To be more precise, because I mean the man actually, before he has his heart attack, he starts laughing his ass off because he figured it out. He figured out the whole process, and he knew, shit, I'm dead.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, that's also an interesting one to talk about. One thing, too, is the ending. I thought there were some good practical effects where they shoot the actual killer, Lorenzo. One thing that I think is kind of funny and a connection that I did not make until I learned a little bit more about the film too is Lorenzo's father is played by the same character that played Carlo in Deep Red, who is kind of David Hemming's friend, who basically his mom is the killer in that one, and he basically kind of like tries to cover up for his mom by like threatening the characters in that one. So he's basically doing the same thing here, trying to cover up for his family member that's a serial killer. So I thought it was kind of a funny coincidence that you have Carlo reappearing here in this film, playing basically the same role, but kind of a generation older, where he's trying to cover up for his son that's a killer.
In this one, he's more of a douchebag, though.
Yes, yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, for sure, yeah. Carlo in Deep Red seems like a good guy, and this one he seems more like a lawyer schmuck.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if that's it, we can move on to Souvenir, which I also need to think about, actually, come to think of it.
All right, I think I know what I want. Oh,
Yeah, what do you want?
I'll take the pen.
The one that the parking attendant thinks worth like $500?
5,000, dude. 5,000.
5,000. You don't want the bloody flute?
No. I think that pen had some strong resistance. The bloody French horn, not so much.
Okay. Man. I should have thought about this. I knew this was coming. I'll take some of those vintage children's books with the lullabies.
All right.
Yeah, why not? Yeah. Okay, who won the movie?
I'll have to give it to Argento, despite
Oh, really?
despite talking
Okay.
shit about him a lot. I think this is a very well put together film. One thing that directors do actually do is pick actors. I mean, of course, with help / permission of the producers. And I think he did a great job picking some actors. He did not choose his daughter, so that gets extra points. It shouldn't, but I mean, even Coppola has sinned on that. So
Yeah. Although Coppola made the mistake once and then didn't repeat it, and Argento seems to repeatedly make it. I mean, we'll say this. Aja Argento is in Dark Glasses, which is released on Shudder in a month. Fingers crossed. Okay, well, I'm going to give it to Max von Sydow. He's just really good in this film, and I think carries a lot of weight. I think him and Argento are probably the legitimate co-winners of this, because it is a really good Argento, too. He's firing pretty much almost at peak cylinders on a couple points of this film. I don't think it's his best, but I think it is I think it's one that I do like a lot. Okay, so rating, and is this your favorite of the post-opera Giallo that you've seen? So Trauma, Stendhal Syndrome, and Sleepless.
rating, I'll give it a 7.5.
Okay.
Closer to a 10. So, by the way, just anyone who's listening, my ratings change from time to time. So on the same movie, I will rate it differently the next day. Meaning my rating is just my feeling at this very moment. I do not write it.
Yeah.
I did not write it down. The reason I'm saying this is because I put it on the top of the post-opera Giallo, and in fact, I put it fairly. I almost put it at the same level of Phenomena.
Interesting.
Granted, I put opera above Phenomena.
Yeah, I think Phenomena's highs. Well, the trains Phenomena also has very uneven moments. Its highs are really high too. Like its ending and Phenomena is really phenomenal. Well, that was kind of unintentional, but it's really good. And the train scene here is also really, really good. So, I don't know. Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. Those are two very different films too, so hard to compare. Yeah, I mean, I was going to come in right at 7.52, so I think you're pretty eye to eye with me on this. And I definitely like this a little bit more than Trauma, which I think is also a very fun film, and much more than Stendhal Syndrome, which I legitimately just don't enjoy. Yeah, sadly, since this film was released, not a ton of movement on the Giallo stuff, so not necessarily a lot to check out. He would go on to do The Card Player in 2003 or 2004, which is a Giallo, not particularly great. And then he did a film called Giallo with Adrian Brody in 2009, which is just frankly speaking quite bad. And I think Argento even acknowledges that it's bad. I think he lost creative control at some point to that film, so it's just not very good. So we will not be watching those films for here, so we'll be moving on to some different films. We'll probably come back to The Well of Italy now and then to catch up on some other films, so maybe we'll cover some of those old Fulci ones that we never got to. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun watching these Giallos. Any last words on this film, or just watching all these Giallos in general, Iñaki?
I am surprised. Speaking of Giallo, I know that this is not a Giallo, but I'm surprised you did not put. Shoot, I forgot the name of the movie now. The one by the same director of Scarface.
Oh, Brian De Palma, Blowout, or no, Dressed to Kill.
Dressed to Kill. I'm surprised you didn't put that here, even though technically it's not a Giallo, but it
I was using the strict definition that would have to be like at least partly Italian made. So
got it.
Otherwise, yeah. I mean, I do quite adore that film, but it's American. I mean, very American.
Well, yeah, because I mean, I heard *Malignant* is kind of like I have not watched that film, but I heard it's similar to Giallo films. But I'm assuming that also would not fall then under the category, right?
Dressed to Kill is closer to Giallo film than *Malignant* is, okay. But we'll put it this way. I would say so *Malignant* is set in Seattle, a city that I live in, and is close to your heart. And the two films it is definitely the closest to are Phenomena and Trauma. So, two of his more, maybe not his best, but two of his most fun.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah. So, I don't know, maybe you brought that up. Maybe that'll be one to talk about in the future. I mean, we're moving into October next, so we'll be doing probably a couple horror films for sure. Not that we avoid horror films in the off months, but I think we'll probably want to watch a couple of those coming up soon.
I mean,
okay. Yeah, go ahead.
No, actually, yeah, this probably should be out of the phone. I was like saying, like, yeah, we could always do like the zombie genre, and then we can enjoy more of Fulci.
Yeah, well, yeah. I would definitely be down for that. There's some fun Italian zombie films. There's some fun American zombie films too. But thank you everyone for tuning in. You can email us at zafilm2film@gmail.com. You can also tweet at us at zafilm2film. Let us know what you would like to see if you have enjoyed all these Italian films. I have noticed that over the course of time, as we've talked more about Italian films, those films tend to get discovered on this podcast, and I think some people just listen to all of the Italian episodes at once, as it tends to rise a little bit over time. So thank you to all those people, and we will see y'all in a few weeks.
Ciao.